I don't know how to begin this, or if I should at all. Some things aren't meant to be shared, some horrors are better kept buried. But if I don't write this down, I'll lose my mind. It started with a phone call. A single voicemail that should have never existed. It was a Wednesday evening, late October. The wind outside howled against my window, and dead leaves scraped along the pavement like brittle fingers. I was home alone, staring blankly at the television, when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. New voicemail, one message. The number was restricted. I hesitated before pressing play. The moment I heard the voice, my stomach twisted into a tight knot. It was Daniel's voice. My older brother, Daniel, had died 6 days ago. The funeral had been just yesterday. I had seen his body, pale and lifeless, in that coffin. He was gone. There was no doubt about that. But now, his voice was crackling through my phone, distorted and weak, as if he was speaking from somewhere far away. Hey. Alex. A long, static-filled pause. Can you hear me? I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking so badly that I nearly dropped the phone. I don't know where I am. The voicemail ended. I sat frozen, my mind unable to process what I had just heard. This was impossible. Someone had to be messing with me, using an old recording of Daniel's voice, playing some sick joke. But who? And why? I played the message again. The way he said my name. The slight rasp in his voice. That hesitation before he spoke, like he was confused. It was all so real. I checked the call log again. The number was still restricted. No way to trace it. Then, before I could think, my phone buzzed again. New voicemail, one message. Another one. My pulse pounded against my ribs as I pressed play. Alex. Don't let them. Don't let them take me. Static. Louder this time. Sharp, piercing, almost like a scream buried beneath the white noise. Then silence. The message ended. I felt the world tilt around me, the air in the room suddenly thick, suffocating. My hands were ice cold, and my heartbeat thundered in my ears. I tried to call the number back, but of course, it was restricted. I told myself it wasn't him. It couldn't be. Daniel was dead. I had watched them lower his casket into the ground. He was gone. And yet, his voice was still here. The next morning, I woke up to another voicemail. And that was just the beginning. The second voicemail came just hours after I tried to block the number. I didn't want to hear it again. I didn't want to acknowledge that what I was experiencing could possibly be real. But I couldn't ignore it. I didn't know why I even checked my phone that morning. Maybe I hoped it was a mistake, some glitch in the system. Maybe I was just trying to convince myself it was a prank or some sick coincidence. But no. The voicemail was there. New voicemail, one message. I felt a cold sweat break out along the back of my neck as I pressed play. It was Daniel's voice again, but this time, it was clearer. More urgent. As if whatever was causing it to be distorted before had started to fade away. Alex. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My throat tightened. This wasn't the rambling of a dead man, this was a plea. I didn't mean to leave you like that. But they made me. Static, thick, and suffocating. A buzzing, distorted noise overtook the message, swallowing his voice. My heart thudded in my chest as I waited, desperate for the message to continue. They're coming for you. The message cut off abruptly, mid-sentence. The phone line went silent. I stared at the screen for a long time, unsure of what I had just heard. It made no sense. What was he trying to say? Who was coming for me? What had he meant by they made me? I was shaking now. My whole body was trembling. I couldn't think clearly. My hands were slick with sweat as I frantically searched through my contacts for someone to call. Anyone. But my phone was dead. Completely frozen. I tried to power it on again, and when it finally rebooted, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was another voicemail. New voicemail, one message. It was too much. I couldn't take it. I couldn't listen to another one. But I did. I pressed play. This time, it was almost a whisper. Faint. So faint that I almost didn't hear it. Alex. They're not who they say they are. The voice, his voice, was weaker now, strained, as if it had been stretched to the breaking point. There was a long, heavy pause. Then the words came, too quickly, almost like a warning. Don't trust the cops. Don't trust anyone. Don't even trust the funeral director. I felt a pit open in my stomach. They know everything. They're watching you. I immediately hung up, the phone slipping from my hands as the blood drained from my face. I couldn't breathe. What did he mean? Who was he talking about? Why was he saying things like that? And then, it hit me. The funeral director. I hadn't given it much thought before, but there had been something off about him the entire time. His cold, practiced smile when we had the viewing. His hands that lingered just a little too long as they adjusted Daniel's body in the coffin. I remembered the heavy smell of antiseptic in the room, the way he had insisted that the body be kept under tight security after the ceremony. I shook my head. No. I was thinking too much. This was paranoia. I couldn't let myself get caught in a spiral of madness. But then, I remembered the last time I saw Daniel. It was the night before he died. He had called me, his voice sounding strange, like something was wrong. I had told him I'd meet him in the morning, but he insisted we speak then. The conversation had been brief. Don't go to that meeting, he'd said. Whatever happens, don't go. That was all he said before hanging up abruptly. He'd sounded fine, but there had been something about it, the urgency, the panic in his voice, that I couldn't shake. I tried to put the thought out of my mind. My brother was dead. But the messages, the warnings, they were real. I didn't have time to think about it any longer. The phone buzzed again. I stared at it. Another voicemail. My mind raced as I slowly reached for the device. I pressed play. Alex. The voice was barely audible. It sounded like Daniel, but there was something off. His voice was hoarse, strained, like someone who had been screaming for hours. Alex, you need to stop looking for answers. Stop digging. Don't you understand? I'm not. I'm not the same person anymore. The static came back, louder now, crashing over his words. It sounded like someone was whispering in the background, low and unintelligible, but there was no mistaking the fear in Daniel's voice. They've taken me. And now, they're coming for you. Just like they came for me. The message cut off abruptly, leaving me with nothing but the deafening silence. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. My hands were trembling, my body rigid with fear. I couldn't make sense of what I was hearing, but there was no doubt in my mind, something was terribly wrong. I had to know more. I had to find out what was going on. But at that moment, a new thought crossed my mind. Could this be a message from beyond the grave? Was this really my brother? Or something else entirely, something trying to trap me, or worse, take me too? I didn't know the answers. But I was determined to find out. And as I stared at the phone, I knew one thing for certain, the calls weren't over yet. The morning after the third voicemail was the longest of my life. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, that I wasn't alone. The phone sat there on my desk, mocking me with its silence. I hadn't listened to the last message yet. I knew it would be another twist in the madness, another warning or cryptic plea. But this time, I couldn't ignore it. I had to know. I had to know what Daniel was trying to tell me before the messages drove me mad. I picked up the phone, almost with a sense of dread. The screen flickered for a moment before the new voicemail icon appeared. New voicemail, one message. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the blinking light. I don't know if it was minutes or hours. All I knew was that my hands felt clammy and the weight of the phone in my palm felt heavier than it ever had before. I pressed play. It was Daniel's voice again. But this time, it was different. The urgency had faded, replaced by something colder, something more detached. It almost sounded like someone, or something else, was speaking through him. Alex. His voice trembled, almost as if he was in pain. There was a rawness to it, a desperation. But it was as though the words were being forced out of him, each syllable dragging with it an unearthly strain. You need to stop. Please, I'm begging you. The static was there, too. Louder now, almost as if it were trying to drown out his words. And the whispering, those faint voices in the background, it was growing louder, more distinct. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but I could hear them, low and insistent. You have to understand, Daniel's voice continued, but now it sounded distant. Like he was far away, trapped in some other place. I didn't die. Not the way they told you. The people who killed me. They're not human. They made me one of them. I froze, my heart stuttering in my chest. I replayed those words in my mind, unable to comprehend them. They made me one of them? Who was he talking about? What the hell was he trying to say? They. His voice wavered, and the static surged again, like an electric shock through my skull. The whispering in the background grew louder still, like the voices of a crowd, chanting something I couldn't hear. The phone cut out, and for a moment, I was left with nothing but an eerie silence, a deep, suffocating emptiness. Then, another sound, a scraping noise, like nails on a chalkboard, a horrible, unnatural screeching noise, came through the speaker. Then the voicemail ended. I stared at the phone, hands trembling, blood running cold. What the hell was happening? I felt as if I was on the verge of slipping into a nightmare, a waking dream where nothing made sense anymore. My brother, Daniel, he hadn't just died. Whatever had happened to him, whatever was happening to me, it wasn't natural. And it wasn't over. I didn't want to listen to any more. But I couldn't stop myself. I had to know. I had to find out what he was trying to warn me about before it was too late. I left the house, not sure where I was going, only that I had to get out. My thoughts were a jumbled mess. The messages, the voice, the cryptic warnings, there had to be something that tied it all together. Some explanation. Some clue. I went to the funeral home. I needed answers, and the only person who might know something was the one who had handled everything, the one who had seen my brother in his final moments. The funeral director. I arrived at the building, the same cold, sterile place where Daniel had been laid to rest. The air inside was thick with the scent of formaldehyde, and the fluorescent lights hummed like a persistent fly buzzing in your ear. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I approached the counter. A woman with dark, tired eyes greeted me. She was the receptionist, and I could see the dull sadness in her gaze, the kind of sadness that comes from dealing with death every single day. I need to speak to Mr. Collins, I said, my voice trembling despite myself. The receptionist nodded, then picked up the phone to make the call. Moments later, she hung up and motioned for me to follow her down a long hallway. The walls were lined with somber, cream-colored photos of deceased individuals. Their eyes seemed to follow me as I walked, their faces frozen in expressions that made my skin crawl. When we reached the door at the end of the hall, she knocked gently before stepping aside. The man who opened the door was the same one who had greeted me at the funeral. His smile was tight, almost too perfect. But something about him unsettled me. It wasn't just the way he looked, it was the way he moved. His movements were too smooth, too practiced, as though he was trying to hide something. "Alex," he said with a forced grin. "What can I do for you?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I needed to ask the right questions. I needed him to answer without looking like he was hiding something. I need to know about Daniel, I said, my voice cracking. What happened to him? I need to know the truth. The smile faded. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, he glanced over his shoulder at the room behind him, as if to make sure no one was listening. The truth, you say? He looked at me carefully, then nodded slowly, as if considering whether to speak at all. The truth, he continued, his voice low, is a dangerous thing. Sometimes, it's better not to know. I stared at him, feeling my blood run cold. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I felt as if I was about to walk into something I couldn't escape from. "Mr. Collins," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger, "what aren't you telling me?" His eyes narrowed, and for the first time since I'd entered, he seemed genuinely uncomfortable. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "There are things that no one should know. You should go home, Alex," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You should forget about your brother. Forget about everything. I didn't want to hear anymore. Every word he spoke only deepened the pit of dread in my stomach. But I couldn't leave without answers. Not yet. Before I could speak again, I heard it, the sound of my phone vibrating in my pocket. My heart dropped into my stomach. It was another voicemail. I don't know why I did it. I don't know why I listened to the voicemail after everything I'd already heard. Maybe it was that voice. Daniel's voice. Maybe it was because, despite everything, despite the warnings, I needed to hear it again. I should have walked away. I should have turned my back on this madness and left the funeral home with nothing more than the questions I could never ask. I should have let it go. But I didn't. I stood in that dark hallway, staring at the phone in my hand, my heart beating in my throat. My fingers were numb as I swiped to open the voicemail. It was there, staring back at me, a blinking light that haunted me. New voicemail, one message. I pressed play. This time, Daniel's voice was different. Cold. Hollow. There was no warmth to it, no trace of the brother I had known. Only the unmistakable sound of suffering. Alex. It's happening. It's already happening. The words were strained, as if coming through a wall of something oppressive, something suffocating. The static buzzed louder than ever before, as though the sound itself was trying to drown out his words. The whispering, those distorted, indecipherable voices, raged in the background. It sounded like hundreds of people, all speaking at once, their words blending into a cacophony of madness. I could hear the tremor in his voice, the way he gasped for breath, the way he tried, desperately, to hold himself together. I'm not myself anymore, Alex. The words cut through the static. They've changed me. I don't know if I can stop it. I don't know how long I can. The phone crackled violently as if someone, or something, was trying to claw its way through the line. The noise intensified until it felt like it was reverberating inside my skull. A deafening buzz overtook everything, drowning out whatever Daniel was trying to say. The voices in the background grew louder, more frantic. And then, a new sound. It was a scraping sound. Metal on metal. Like a door being torn open. I felt a rush of cold air as if the room around me had suddenly dropped several degrees. I couldn't hear anything after that. It was all too much. Too real. Too wrong. I slammed my phone down on the desk, my chest heaving as I gasped for air. What the hell was happening to me? To Daniel? I couldn't think straight. The walls felt like they were closing in on me, the suffocating darkness creeping closer. The air was thick with the same oppressive dread that had been following me since the moment I received that first voicemail. I ran my hands through my hair, trying to calm my racing thoughts. My mind was spinning, and the only thing I could focus on was one thing: I needed answers. But I couldn't do this alone. I had to talk to someone. Someone who could understand. I needed to talk to Lena. Lena had been my best friend since childhood. She'd known Daniel, too. She'd been there with me the day we buried him, the day everything went dark. She'd seen the way I'd fallen apart, the way I'd clung to the idea that my brother wasn't really gone. And I knew that if there was anyone who could help me, it was her. I left the funeral home without another word to Mr. Collins. He didn't need to tell me anything anymore. I wasn't going to let him stop me. I drove to Lena's apartment. It wasn't far, but every second felt like an eternity. The static of the voicemail still buzzed in my head, a lingering hum in the back of my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me, watching me. That no matter where I went, I was never truly alone. When I arrived at her place, I didn't even knock. I just let myself in. Lena was sitting on the couch, her eyes glued to her phone, her face drawn in a way I hadn't seen before. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. She didn't even look up when I entered the room. "Lena," I said, my voice trembling. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide. "Alex. You're..." She stopped, blinking rapidly as if trying to focus. "You look terrible," I said. "I need to talk to you. I need your help." Lena's expression shifted, the concern in her eyes turning to confusion. "Help? What's going on? Are you okay?" I wasn't okay. I wasn't even close to okay. But I didn't know how to explain it. How could I tell her that my dead brother was calling me, warning me, telling me things no one should know? How could I make her understand that whatever was happening to me, it wasn't normal? I sat down beside her. The cold sweat on my palms felt like ice against the warmth of her skin. "I've been getting voicemails," I said, my voice cracking. "From Daniel." Lena's face went pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I could see her trying to form a response, but she was just as lost for words as I was. "You think I'm losing it, don't you?" I laughed bitterly. "I think I am, too. But Lena, it's real. I'm not imagining this." She took a deep breath, exhaling slowly. "Alex. What do you mean? How? How are you getting these voicemails?" I pulled my phone out of my pocket and handed it to her. "Listen to this." I hit play. Daniel's voice filled the room, low and desperate. The words spilled out in a rush, too quick to understand, too garbled to make sense of. But the fear in his voice was unmistakable. Lena's face went blank as she listened, her lips parted in shock. She didn't say anything at first. She just stared at the phone, like she was waiting for it to stop, like she was hoping it would end. When it finished, she didn't move. The room was deathly silent. I don't know what to say, Alex," Lena whispered, her voice barely audible. "This doesn't make any sense. Daniel is. He's gone. This can't be happening. I know." I could barely choke out the words. "But it is. And if we don't figure out what's going on, it's only going to get worse." Lena swallowed hard, her hands trembling as she handed the phone back to me. "We need to find out the truth before it's too late." I looked at her, a new sense of resolve forming in the pit of my stomach. "Where do we start?" And that was when the door slammed open. The door slamming open sent a chill through the room, as though the air had turned to ice in an instant. My heart skipped a beat as I turned toward the sound. Lena jumped up from the couch, her face going pale. We stood frozen for what felt like an eternity, staring at the dark figure standing in the doorway. It was the last thing I had expected to see. I had hoped to find answers, not more confusion and terror. The figure in the doorway wasn't anyone I recognized at first. They were tall, dressed in dark, heavy clothing, and their face was obscured by a hood. A faint whispering sound echoed from the figure, like the buzzing of flies or the rustling of leaves, low and almost imperceptible. The atmosphere in the room grew heavier with each passing second, a thick, palpable sense of dread settling over me. "Who are you?" Lena demanded, her voice shaking as she stepped closer to me. The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, it took a slow step into the room, and with that single movement, everything in the room seemed to warp. The lights flickered erratically, and the air turned thick and suffocating. My chest felt like it was being squeezed. Then, the figure lifted its head slightly, and the voice that came out of the shadows sent a tremor of fear down my spine. It wasn't a voice I had expected to hear, but it was unmistakable. It was Daniel's voice. "I told you. I told you to stop." I gasped, stepping back, my hands shaking violently. It was his voice, definitely his. But there was something wrong with it, something hollow and distant. As if the words were being spoken from deep inside a cave, carried through layers of distortion and static. "No, no, this isn't possible," I whispered, my eyes darting from the figure to Lena, who was looking back at me in horror. The figure's movements were jerky and unnatural, like it was struggling to maintain control. The whispering around it grew louder, the sound of people speaking in a language I didn't recognize. There was no rhythm to it, no sense to the noise, it was just chaos. Lena backed away slowly, fear etched into her face. She looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Alex, what the hell is happening? What is this?" I couldn't answer her. The figure in the doorway seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy, drawing the shadows around it closer, feeding off the darkness in the room. My blood ran cold as I realized that whatever was happening to Daniel, it wasn't him. Not anymore. Whatever was inside him, whatever had taken control, it was something else. "Daniel? Is that you?" I asked, my voice hoarse. I didn't know why I was asking, it was obvious it wasn't him. But something inside me screamed to reach out, to try to break whatever hold was on him. The figure tilted its head slightly, and then, for a moment, the voice changed. The distortion faded, and for just a split second, it sounded like Daniel again. "Alex, please. You have to listen. They're coming for you." I felt a cold wave of dread wash over me. "What do you mean, coming for me?" I asked, stepping forward. My breath hitched as the figure seemed to shift, its form flickering between that of the man I remembered and something darker. And then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the figure vanished, leaving behind only the silence. For a moment, I didn't move. I couldn't. I was frozen to the spot, my body locked in place as I struggled to make sense of what had just happened. But there was no sense to be made. The air was still heavy, thick with the echoes of the figure's presence. Lena slowly came up beside me, her hand shaking as she reached for mine. "I think we're dealing with something. Something much worse than we thought," she said softly. I nodded, my mind racing. I had to get to the bottom of this. I couldn't just let it go. There were too many unanswered questions, and the fear gnawing at the edges of my mind told me that this wasn't over. It was just beginning. I pulled out my phone, my hand still trembling, and opened the voicemail app. There was one message left, just one. I hadn't checked it yet. But now, I knew I had no choice. Lena watched me as I pressed play. The message was short, much shorter than the others. But it was more chilling than anything I'd heard before. Alex. The voice was unmistakable. It was Daniel's, but now it was different, closer. Desperate. He sounded like he was gasping for breath, as if he was running out of time. They're already here. Don't trust anyone. They're watching. They're waiting for you. The line cut off suddenly, leaving nothing but the sharp static that crackled through the phone. The noise felt like it was vibrating through my bones, a constant hum that didn't fade. I looked at Lena, my eyes wide with panic. Who's watching us? Who's coming for us? Before she could answer, the phone began to buzz again, an incoming call flashing on the screen. I froze. I didn't know what to expect. I hesitated, then answered the call. The line was dead silent, but I could hear something on the other side. Something. Breathing. Heavy, slow breaths. Alex. I knew that voice. It was Daniel. But this time, it wasn't a message. It was him, speaking to me in real time. Alex, you have to stop. I could hear the fear in his voice now, his breathing ragged and uneven. But there was something else, something I didn't recognize. There was anger in his voice. They've taken me, Alex. They've taken me and now they want you. You have to listen, stop searching. Stop digging. It's already too late. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. My mind was reeling, spinning from everything that had happened. What was this? What was happening to my brother? And then, just as quickly as it had begun, the line went dead. No more static. No more breathing. Just silence. The phone slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a dull thud. I could barely breathe, my chest tightening with the weight of everything that had just happened. I felt like I was suffocating, like the air around me had turned to stone. Lena grabbed my arm, her voice breaking through the haze. Alex, we need to leave. Now. This isn't safe. I nodded, my mind a blur of confusion and terror. I knew she was right. I had to get out. But just as I turned to leave, I felt it. The cold. The oppressive, suffocating cold that seemed to come from every direction. It was everywhere now, filling the room like a shadow that could not be escaped. And then, just as the door to the outside world seemed within reach, I heard it. A whisper. A voice. Alex. I froze, the hair on the back of my neck standing on end. It was Daniel. Or what had once been Daniel. And this time, it wasn't a voicemail. It wasn't a call. It was real. He was standing there, behind me, his voice trailing off into the darkness. I'm sorry. The last thing I remember is Lena's scream, and then everything went black. Dash.